Hi, Dex here. I'd like to talk a little bit about my latest developments in what we call identity processing as a specifically valuable technique in the field of what I like to call therapeutic spiritual processing. I've made some new discoveries and some innovations just in the past month or two that I'm finding to be more valuable than even I expected they would be. And I don't see these particular approaches used in any of the other valence or identity processing techniques that I know of. I've done a lot of research in this area. And some of it just comes from some of the information I've studied, and some of it comes from observation. But for all that is uh, known and practiced with identity processing, um, there have been some holes. And in terms of completeness, there may always be some holes in completeness. Everything is a work in progress. I think that's the right way to look at everything in life. So anyway, one thing that I'm finding particularly fascinating and game-changing regarding identity processing is the fact of an identity is something that tends to be triggered again and again and again in a person uh, automatically, not consciously. And there's all types of processing you can do to get to the root of the person's attraction to that identity and what it is a solution to. But there's another part of this, and that identities uh, react to and interrelate with other identities. And you just can't be very complete with identity processing without addressing the interrelations of the identity being processed with other identities that it interacts with. So that's why one of the more recent steps I've added to identity processing uh, goes like this. After many other steps, which are all revelations in their own, I ask now, is there an identity you've encountered to whom being this current identity that's being processed has been the response? And these other identities can be friends, admirers, lovers, partners, antagonists, adversaries, helpers. Uh, they can be someone from whom admiration is desired, or love, or respect, or any number of things. So we're not just looking for identities that the identity being addressed has had a problem with or been adversarial with, but in the bigger sphere of the games in which this particular set of identities and identities are part of games. All the identities within this particular sphere of this game are and are there to be addressed, because until you really fully address the entire playing field in which any given set of identities participates, and that means every identity within that sphere, you really haven't cleaned it out. So this question has turned up some very interesting results early on. Is there an identity you've encountered to whom this identity that we're processing has been the response? It's quite interesting what comes up, and all manner of identities in various people that have been encountered, and a person will start to see how many people they've been encountered have been this identity from their perception. Another thing to understand about identities is sometimes an identity that you encounter, a particular persona, attitude in other beings, is something the other being primarily creates to be regarded as and seen to be. But sometimes it is you projecting that identity onto them as part of the roles of the game that's being played or desired to be played. That enters into this too. But it's very interesting when a person starts to list out, it's quite interesting how many different identities can come up. That the identity that's being processed that the person has been wearing um, has actually been a response to. And so the reason this is important to address is if you're going to clean out the automatic triggering of an identity, then you have to help rehabilitate the person to simply experience those other identities that can be encountered without falling into the automaticity of shifting into the identity that they've become accustomed to responding with in encountering the other identity. So the way that we do that within this technique that I've evolved is for each identity the person names in answer to the first question, that this identity they've been wearing has been a response to identity A, B, C, D. You take each of those A, B, C, D identities that the person names as an identity that triggered their identity. I say, feel the particular presence and energy of that identity, whatever it is, Joe the plumber, whatever it might be. Feel the particular presence and energy of that identity manifesting completely here and now, permeating your environment and your personal space, and allow it to be here fully in your presence, effortlessly, without resisting it, with no output of energy on your part, no reaching, no reacting, no withdrawing. Simply feel and experience the particular presence and energy of Joe Blow identity. And this takes a little bit of time. A person will tend to close their eyes and really draw in that other identity. I could tell you that all those other identities, the client has also been all of them, so it doesn't take much to draw them in. That's something I've explained before, but it's just part of, within the sphere of any game, a person has actually, in different points, been all of those identities. But anyway, more to the point here is it will take some time. As the person experiences the particular energy and presence of these identities that have triggered their reacting with a certain identity, there's going to be some reactions within the person. They're going to recognize how many different people have represented or been this identity to them in their own perception, and how this has been another trigger for them being the identity that we're now processing. And it's very similar to the Scientology technique of doing OT, TR0, it's called, and TR0, which are mislabeled as communication drills, but are actually some very interesting processing. And what you're processing is the particular presence and energy of the person you're encountering. That's what that is. So here we're applying it in the sense of identities very specifically, which is really essentially not that different from what can be happening with those zero series of TRs, which stands for training routines if you have no familiarity with Scientology. And we just have the being, the client, here and now, fully, effortlessly experience the particular energy and presence of the identity, one of the identities that has triggered in them the wearing of the identity, the shifting into the identity that is currently being processed in the session. And it takes a little bit of time, and then it will be a great feeling of relief, of consciousness, of control. It's quite huge. And then we will do this with each of the identities that have surfaced in answer to this question. Is there an identity you've encountered to whom being this identity we're currently processing has been the response? We do that same technique for each of them, just fully experience the presence and particular energy of that identity that has been encountered. Now, sometimes you may need to help the person along. You'll see certain things happening. Just ask what's happening and have them process what they're experiencing, and maybe they've been reacting to the presence of that identity here and now. And you gently remind them to not react at all, but simply, without resisting at all, just spiritually process those energies. Just effortlessly experience that. And then you'll get that huge release and relief and sense of consciousness and control. It's quite a revelation when that occurs. And I would love to have hundreds of clients to run this process on, because it's really quite profound what happens. And I would love to invite all of you who are practitioners to connect with me and allow me to share the technique with you, mentor you on it as you need mentoring, so that you can run this technique on your clients, along with all the steps that precede it, because I do not believe that commonly these full results will be attainable, that this process will be as effective without the preceding techniques that are part of my identity processing lineup. And one final thing in relation to this. There's one step to do after processing all the identity triggers in relation to the identity being processed. Now, the next step to do will be to run all the steps of identity processing on each of those identities that has triggered the identity you're currently processing. Because as I said, the being has been all of those identities that he is reacting to more presently with a given identity. So I want to share this with everyone. I hope you appreciate and understand, and I hope to hear from you. Have fun.